Welcome to episode 6 of the One podcast, where we go beyond the conference. In this podcast series, we will talk with the esteemed speakers of the One conference through all of the 8 themes of the One conference, and the theme for today is securing the chain. And I am speaking today with Sanne Maasakkers. I also forgot to introduce myself. Sorry about that. Hi, I am Koen from the National Cybersecurity Center, and I used to be the former head of the program committee of the One conference. Sanne, sorry to interrupt you, but welcome to the One podcast. I am starting to get overconfident and think I can do this in one go, but no worries. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sanne. I'm a senior analyst at Mandiant, part of Google Cloud. And I briefed yesterday about researcher versus threat actor. In my daily job, I track threat actors and see what kind of new attacks they execute. I started in offensive security, so as a hacker or a red teamer. And that really helps me now to see what the specific attack is and to see what they did. I also worked at the government at NCC, so we used to be colleagues for almost 2 years, which was really fun.
Yes. So you had your talk here at the One conference. The room was full. People were being left out. So to everybody who wasn't able to be at your talk, can you just give us a little bit a TLDR in 5 minutes of what it was about?
Of course. So the talk was together with Dirk-Jan. I've known Dirk-Jan for, I think, more than 8 years because we started at the red team of Fox IT back then. And we used to do a lot of pen tests and red teams and training together. And he is being a security researcher now, especially in the field of Entra ID and Microsoft services. So he does a lot of security research and finds vulnerabilities in those services. And at some point, I was analyzing an incident response case, and I saw that one of his techniques and one of his tools was being used. So I was like, Whoa, that's kind of funny to know the person that found the technique or made the tool. And I was wondering, does that happen more often than we think? So I was checking that out, and I actually found multiple cases where his security research was being used, even very recently. So that was the start of our idea for the talk. And during the talk, we were talking a little bit more about, okay, how does the security research work? What kind of vulnerabilities did he find in those services? But also, for my part, how did attackers actually use those techniques and those tools during their operations? And how long does it take before a threat actor actually adopts those techniques in the execution of their attack? So our talk was a little bit more about the motivations. What are the motivations of a security researcher? What kind of tools do they develop? Was about what kind of threat actors are using those techniques, but also drawing like a timeline. When was the security research being published? And was out in the open, published for defenders, published for red teamers, for everyone to know what kind of attacks are possible. And when did the threat actor use it in their attack itself? So that is a small TLDR. We can go into specific cases, but what we found is that there are really big differences between the adoption of those techniques by threat actors.
Yeah. So that's actually very interesting because Dirk-Jan probably doesn't do his research to help the threat actors, but he inadvertently did in a way. So was it just his techniques that you found, or did you find other attack methods published by other researchers?
Well, we had 2 cases that we covered in the presentation. So those were really aimed at his research. So one of them was phishing for primary refresh tokens, and the other one was abuse of service principal in a multi-tenant environment. And later we also covered a couple of tools, also by friends in the same community, that were really easy to find. Like, is this tool being used because, for example, we could detect it? So the cases were more his security research, because it's super fun to hear the researcher himself talking about the research he did and then it being abused. But we also covered a couple of tools that were written by people in the community.
Okay, so the theme is securing the chain. Speaking of chain, I heard you say one of your cases was in a multi-tenant environment. That immediately feels like a supply chain issue a little bit. Can we go? Can you tell us a bit more about what that case was about?
Yep. That, of course, that was a really interesting case, and it's also super relevant because it just happened recently, a couple of months ago. So what happened is that a threat actor suspected to be from China is normally they are targeting edge devices and network appliances. So they try to get into VPN systems, for example. And in one of the cases, we saw that when they actually compromised, in this case, a SaaS provider, they were able to obtain the service principal. That is a workload identity. So normally we get like user identity to log into a tenant, but a service principal is an identity that is not really like a person or a user account, but an identity to authenticate to an application. One thing about service principals is that you have a lot of privileges with the application. So if you get a service principal from one tenant that can authenticate to another tenant, that means that you have free entrance to another tenant.
Yeah.
In this case, and we saw that when a SaaS provider was being compromised and the service principal was used, they could authenticate to other tenants, so from their customers, because it was a SaaS provider that created like an application that you could add to your own tenant for creating backups. And by using that, they could go to other tenants and get access to their data. And they had access to their data. They had access to their mailboxes, to SharePoint pages. And we saw the use of specific keywords. So they were looking for specific information on SharePoint. And they exfiltrated a lot of sensitive data in this case. So because another organization, so supply chain, another organization was being compromised, it means that your information was also obtained by threat actor.
Yeah, exactly. So, what can you tell us about this threat actor? Who were they? Were their capabilities?
Well, we see a little bit more about them recently. What I said, we've been observing them for a while, and we suspect them to be from China. And what we saw is that they used a lot of vulnerabilities in network appliances, for example, VPN systems and that kind of stuff. But now we see that they are actually also going to the cloud. So that is a pretty interesting thing because they were after, well, in this case, a SaaS provider. They also use that information from the tenant enter ID environment. They could use that to also authenticate to other tenants. In this case, what else do we know? They target those network appliances because it's hard to detect when something happens on those network appliances, right? There is not a lot of detection or EDR solutions for that. So it's really hard to know that they actually gained access. So the access or was detected or observed more than a year later than they actually got
A year.
access to your to those network devices.
Wow. And do you have any idea about what their motivations were? What were they after? Did they want to deploy ransomware or just steal information?
No, this is for espionage. So these were really targeting organizations with interesting information. So law firms, national security, that kind of information.
Right.
That's what they were after.
And so it took a year before they were detected. What kind of things were they already able to do in that year? What was the impact of this attack?
Well, we showed that also in the presentation. The impact of the attack is that a lot of information that is, well, critical, sensitive information was being obtained by those groups. So related to national security, for example, specific information from law firms, for example. Well, you really don't want that. But if they have access to your tenant, that means that they have access to all the users in the tenant as well, emails in the emails you have, but also internal information, for example.
Right. Well, it comes to my mind when I own a small law firm. Um, I just get a contractor for my IT. I just want to have it done, in the cloud probably. However economical it can be done. But what can a small law firm with maybe not a lot of cybersecurity expertise themselves, what can they do to protect themselves from this kind of attack?
Well, it is a really good one. I mean, you put all your trust in a vendor in this case, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, multiple vendors even, because the cloud, your cloud environment is hosted by a vendor, but in this case, it was also a backup application from another vendor. So you put a lot of trust in a lot of organizations if you have everything hosted in the cloud. With
Yeah.
even and you tie more organizations to your own environment by trusting them. So first, check out who your vendors are. Not vet the vendors, to be honest. So check
Yeah.
who they are, what they can do, and that's the first step.
Yeah.
Then of course, check who has access. What kind of access do they have? Do they have like full access? Whenever something is compromised, do they have access to your full tenant, for example, with all your information, or only a small part of your tenant? And I think that is also a good one. And also for your own responsibility, check if you configured everything. A lot of people think, okay, we'll just buy a cloud solution or we buy a product from a vendor and everything works out of the box and it's fully secure by default. But what you see is that it's just the base and that you need to configure it and test it and to see that if everything is configured in the best way. I mean, we both saw that at NCC, right? Is this okay?
Yeah.
Is this default configuration or not? Because if it's default
Yeah.
configuration, a lot of people have it and it's probably uh, insecure.
Yeah. It's not always secure by default. So it's
Exactly.
about knowing who you're procuring from, knowing. I forgot your second point. Can you repeat that?
But knowing, yeah, know what you buy. Review what kind of access they have.
Right, the access review, and then so configuring not the default configuration because it's probably not secure by default.
Well, it could be secure by default. I'm not saying that's not secure by default, but it could mean that you maybe for your specific use case you need more granular security measures than that is
Right.
already in place, right?
Yeah. And I can imagine it's not always feasible to prevent this kind of attack, because it may also come as a surprise, or maybe if you have a very advanced state-driven actor. Um, so, what can you do if shit still happens?
Well, that's a really good point, and we also address it shortly in our presentation. But we are both in security. We know prevention, detection, response, right?
Right.
Well, you cannot always prevent it, so we go to the second one, detection, and that is a really, really big thing. Um, and this is also a really big thing in this presentation because detection is hard,
Yeah.
especially if it's in a cloud environment, right?
Yeah.
So what we also saw is that visibility is very limited because if you have your cloud environment, which is hosted by another vendor, you're also relying on their detection capabilities and their visibility and their
Right.
telemetry. So sometimes you can buy like add-ons to do the detection, to have more detection, but you just have to rely on that as well, and you have to make sure that you can detect on those systems. We got the information from incident response cases, and we only obtained the information that was related to the attack to analyze it. Of course, we don't have the all the visibility or all the telemetry of the full cloud environment. So that is pretty hard. And I think our presentation was also like a pitch of we should do more about this visibility. We
Right.
are relying on a vendor for that visibility and for that detection, but we also need to take efforts.
Right. Um, so the cloud is only growing. Can we see more of these types of attacks in the future?
Well, we started with a small thread overview, cloud thread overview, and we see that most of the at least based on the information of last year and the incident response cases we did, is that most of the attacks to cloud are still the smaller things like phishing, email phishing, voice phishing, obtain credentials, trying to log in, and that kind of stuff. So yes, we see that a lot. Even voice phishing was recently a big thing. So threat actor calls the organization, calls the service desk, says that they need an account and they can log in because it's publicly available, the cloud, right? So that happens a lot. And what we saw based on the information we had is that that cloud is still like sometimes a niche thing. What Dirk Jan did with his research is really a niche thing and really advanced and really specific. And we see that threat actors don't have that knowledge yet. And they need to at some point if they want to get in, right? But
Right.
it's they're not adopting it like crazy and after a week after launching some security research they're already using it. Um, but it is we saw more recent examples that in the last years than the years before, at least.
Right.
And additionally, we don't know what they know. There was a couple of years, there was an example of Storm 0558, or as we call it, UNC 4920, that they found a way to force for token stealing. We don't know what kind of techniques they already have that they didn't burn yet, because if you use it, it could be detected and then your technique is burned, right?
Right.
So we don't know what they already have until they use it. So there is still like a part of all the analysts that don't know what is actually happening by these threat actors.
Yeah. There is a little bit of an elephant in the room here, because, well, attackers use techniques published by researchers.
Yep.
It's an unwanted side effect. Dirk Jan didn't mean to help the attackers. Well, as I said, he inadvertently did. But what does this mean for the responsibility that researchers have regarding public disclosures?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, most researchers they participate in a bug bounty program or responsible disclosure program. So when they find something, they report it, and the organization tries to fix it. Sometimes pays money, or when you work for NCC or find something for NCC, you get the nice T-shirt, which
Yes.
is really nice actually. Um, and then they fix it, and then you publish about it. So, and when something is fixed in the cloud, it's fixed for everyone. It's not like when you find a vulnerability in the software product that you need to apply a patch for manually
Yeah.
or automatically, where there's some time between the vulnerability and when it's getting patched by everyone. That doesn't happen for the cloud. So, the elephant in the room is here. Whenever something is patched, you can write about it because it's not vulnerable anymore. But some things are not being patched because it's as a feature. It's by design,
Right.
and it's just a really smart way of using it. And we saw that in a couple of in the cases during the presentation. Those were not really vulnerabilities, but techniques that could be abused. And yes, sometimes they get fixed after threat actors are abusing it. So they were not fixed because they were reported because it says by design, or it's a feature, or you just need to take additional measures, for example. But when threat actors use it, they will get fixed anyhow.
Right, right. So vendors might be thinking, or doing some sort of a risk assessment, when this technique is published, that it may not even be, the probability of exploitation might not be very high according to their first estimates, and only after exploitation happens, then they start to fix it actually.
Yeah, well, yes. In these cases, we addressed in the presentation that was the case. Dirk Jan also found. Oh, he really hates me telling this, but it's a really big achievement. He found also a big vulnerability, which allowed threat actors if they found it, because they said that no threat actor found it, so it was not relevant for a presentation. But when it was a technique where you could basically authenticate to basically every tenant,
Oh.
that was of course being fixed, because that is a huge critical vulnerability, CVSS 10.
Yeah.
It was rewarded immediately. It was fixed within 3 days. So there is something between this is by design until this is like a big vulnerability, and well, of course, if you publish about that, then yeah, if you publish about that, it could feel like discomfort for the vendor, right? But it's actually, you have to honor those research, because they're basically
Yeah.
people who find vulnerabilities in your products, that you might not have found, which could have a big, very big impact. So we have to honor those researches, and overstep that possible discomfort of a report where that information is being released by the researcher.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah. At the NCSC, we always embrace researchers who want to do public disclosure. And do you think vendors might be getting scared if they for accepting public disclosure from researchers, if they fear adversaries might use that information?
I guess we both experienced that, right, at NCSC. That some when well, they a researcher could report a vulnerability, and NCC passed it to the actual organization. Not every organization was super willing to do something with it, because, well, I get it. Sometimes you say like, okay, but we put it on the roadmap for next year, so we'll fix it later. So that could be a thing. But also, yeah, I think it's getting better, but some organizations also think that it's a threat, or they don't know what to do about it. But I think it's a really good way, and this is what you need to improve your general security posture. So whenever a security researcher is reporting something, take them seriously, and do something with it. It's not just like a person who is threatening whatever. On the
Yeah.
other hand, if you're a security researcher, also make sure to get taken seriously. So create a good report. Make sure that you don't overstep. So if you find a vulnerability where you can get information from the organization, show it by just showing one piece of information, and not download all the files you could get. So also
Right.
know what you're supposed to do, and create a good report showing it with examples, showing the impact. So organizations can actually assess what you wrote.
Right. We always encourage this at the NCSE, but um, this last summer, there were actually some stories coming from Belgium where public disclosures did not go as well, and it pains me to see that researchers are actually trying to help organizations to improve their resilience, and organizations are not willing to listen. I almost feel like well, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, because at the one conference we all know how important this is. But I still want to reiterate to anyone who is willing to listen, if someone tells you that your system is vulnerable, if they're coming from, maybe you can ask yourself two questions. One, is my network still running? Are my systems still online? If not, second question, is the person demanding a ransom?
Really important.
If that's not the case, then it's probably a benign researcher who is trying to help you, and not someone who is trying to rob you.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think we should also realize that NCC in Analyst is one of the organizations that does this really well with the responsible disclosure program. With well, not suing them, of course,
Right.
when they are within the scope of the program, with rewarding them with a T-shirt, which is like a big token for a lot of security researchers. But for example, I'm coaching the team of hackers within Europe. We participate in the international competition, and I see I see a lot of differences in other countries. So because they are trying to find vulnerabilities as well and they report it, it's not handled as NCSC or at least the Netherlands does, just like the example you gave about Belgium. It's really different. Sometimes they are showing or threatening legal actions because they found something in the network and they don't understand and they think it's like illegal activity.
Yeah, well, strictly speaking, it's not always legal what researchers do, but this is more of responsible disclosure is more of a gentleman's agreement. But sometimes when a legal advisor in a company is getting the upper hand in the discussion, and they can show the articles in the law that say it's forbidden. Well, yeah, maybe they can convince the decision makers about it, but I really want to stress that legal action doesn't fix the problem. In your organization has a problem, and legal action to defend against a researcher is not going to help you. So, as we wrap up, do you have some key insights you would still like to share with the listeners? Maybe some of them are researchers, but maybe some of them are companies receiving reports from researchers. What do you want to give to, as a message to them?
Well, it's good to summarize the takeaways we also had at the presentation. Those are the motivations of security researchers and threat actors are really different. Security researchers find vulnerabilities to get into a system or maybe do lateral movement or privilege escalation. A threat actor just wants a lot of data because they want to get it for a political motivation, economical advantage, military advantage, for example, or just to extort you if you're a financial gain group. So that's a big difference in how research is being done and what is being used. We saw big differences in adoption of those techniques. So if you have a tool which is really easy to use, they probably try it because it's easy. The risk is lower, maybe. And the reward could be high. And the rest is we lack visibility on on these things. There might happen way more, but if you are not in charge of the detection or you don't have the full telemetry, you just have to rely on a vendor. So the pitch was make sure that detection is that we could do detection better at this point, that there's more visibility in these attacks so we can actually see more than that. But based on the information we had that were like based on information we got because we could obtain it, for example, it was already clear that some techniques were being adopted by those threat actors within or a time frame of 2 months, 2 years, anything in between.
Yes. So in the prevention, detection, and response chain, prevention is a responsibility of the vendor, of course, but detection, you really need the data, the visibility to do proper detection. All right. Thank you so much for being with us, Sanne.
Thank you.
If you are curious about the talk Sanne and Dirk-Jan gave at the One Conference, there will be a summary of their session on the website one-conference.nl, and their slides will also be there. Next week, we'll be diving into geopolitics and what it takes for Europe to become digitally sovereign. And we'll be speaking with Cody Barrow from Eclectic IQ about that. So, we will see you next week.